Normally, I'm not this nitpicky about brief moments in a video game, but if you like, you can consider this video as revenge for the arduous tedium Kingdom Come Deliverance has put me through in what are normally simple tasks. However, that tedium is the point of the game, so I'd look like a fool for criticizing it, despite it being the antithesis of what I enjoy about gaming. But the trade-off for that tedium is a hyper-realistic game world that puts realism over everything else, including the moment-to-moment experience. So for there to be a moment early on in that experience that's so absurdly comical with its moon logic is almost inexcusable in a game that demands the player meet it on its terms. It relates to how it justifies Henry's reset into a pitiful peasant. But first, some praise. Kingdom Come Deliverance's success comes from its obsessive realism, and the only way to facilitate that realism is through its protagonist Henry, who has nothing to his name at the start of the adventure, which leads to an arduous but extremely satisfying player progression as they gain more and more status and abilities in this indifferent world. So, that raises the question of what they do for the sequel. Henry is already the right hand of the heir to a powerful lord. He has risen immensely in his social standing. But the game can't start us out as a competent guard, because then it loses that immensely satisfying progression that was the key to its success. Making things even more difficult is that Kingdom Come 2 isn't just a regular kind of sequel, it's an immediate follow-up, meaning they can't justify a character reset with the excuse of it being years since their last adventure. It's only been 2 days for Henry and Hans, so they're still in the exact same physical condition as they were in the finale to the last game. Kingdom Come 2's solution to this problem is in equal parts brilliant and moronically justified. But let's start with the praise. Having Henry and Hans be robbed of their gear in the prologue is a brilliant way to facilitate them losing their social status in this new land. It adds immediate tragedy and tension to the story, in the same way the slaughter of Scarlet did to the first, and allows for a setting that creates a brilliant dynamic of a noble who's lost everything and his subordinate who has to step up and take the leading role, creating friction in their relationship. However, while the justification for our material losses is done in a brilliant way that makes for a much more exciting hook than the revenge narrative of the first, the reasoning behind our loss of skills is nothing short of laughable. During their escape from the bandits, Henry has a scuffle with an enemy, which results in him plummeting from a cliff. After his recovery, the game explicitly tells you that due to this fall, you have lost several main-level skill and perk points. What JRPG selective amnesia bullshit is this? Look, I get it for resetting our combat skills and nerfing our damage number, but how in the hell does a traumatic injury reset my ability to perform alchemy or my tolerance for alcohol? This all-encompassing stat reset absolutely breaks any logical sense in the progression that these games had. If the fall was so catastrophic that it neuters our ability to command dogs and ride horses, then how the hell are we walking the very next morning? Now, this fall also triggers a traumatic flashback to the first game's events, which would absolutely psychologically scar Henry, but it wouldn't affect our reading comprehension. If they wanted to show the psychological effects of this near-death experience, then maybe have us fail to go to sleep sometimes. So if we close our eyes, we suffer from night terrors and can't go back to sleep until we've completely exhausted ourselves. Saying that these visions would remove our skills but not affect our cognitive functions is akin to the dumb selective amnesia plot points in The Witcher and FF7. And again, to hammer this point home, I don't actually care all that much about plot contrivances. But when your game is so brutally tedious in its devotion to realism that it intentionally makes the player suffer, then I expect more justification for a stat reset than a plot point from Zombieland Saga. So what could they have done to justify Henry's stat reset? Like I said, the game takes place 2 days after the first, so they can't just have him be terrible at everything again, and they can't have him keep a select few skills and then only have him learn new ones, like they did in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, because the game's devotion to realism prevents them from having any wiggle room, and that's the core point I'm trying to make. Having realism in your stories and game is a great thing. It puts a limit on the writer, and forces them to come up with realistic solutions instead of last-second Deus Ex Machinas. But Kingdom Come Deliverance is a prime example of taking things too far, because eventually you're going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place, and the only way out of that place is to smash the walls down. The tighter you build your prison, the less room you have as a writer. To the game's credit, it's extraordinary just how much they cram into that tiny space, with there being reports that this game's script is longer than Baldur's Gate 3. But their strict devotion to realism has caught up with the series, making for one of the most jarring contrivances in RPG history. If you're going to force me to engage in hyper-realistic gameplay, then I expect a hyper-realistic story in return. For more Kingdom Come essays, here's one breaking down how successful the improvements to combat were, and I'll be back in 2 days.